We made it through another year. We survived 2023. It is time to look back at the entire course of the year and reflect on my absolute favorite books that I read in 2023. So if you are interested in my wrap up of 2023 and hearing the very best books that I read over the course of the year, then stick around with me through this video and let's get right into my list of the 15 best books that I read in 2023. The first book that I have to talk about is The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. I feel like The Haunting of Hill House is the quintessential haunted house book. I have read so many haunted house stories over the course of this year. There are actually a few more that placed on my best of list, and I truly feel like The Haunting of Hill House is like the titan of all the haunted house stories. If you have never read The Haunting of Hill House, we are following our main character, Eleanor, who is invited to go stay at a haunted house with several other guests where they are basically trying to prove the existence of the paranormal and get proof that this house is haunted. This is one of those books that I have not been able to stop thinking about since I initially read it. It has lived with me in my heart, it has lived with me in my soul, and I really feel like that was the threshold of what I was looking for the books that I chose for my best of 2023. These are books that have made a lasting impact on me. They're stories that have stuck with me that won't soon be forgotten. They're books that really, really touched me. And this is one of those incredibly special books. My absolute favorite thing about The Haunting of Hill House is Shirley Jackson's beautiful writing in prose. It's honestly like the vibes of this book that I am just obsessed with. She writes in a way that is so atmospheric and enchanting and dreamy. There's just something indescribable about the way that Shirley Jackson writes, in particular the way that Shirley Jackson wrote this book, that is so haunting, is so beautiful, and it keeps me wanting to come back to this world, back to these characters, and continue to re-immerse myself back into this very charming landscape that Shirley Jackson masterfully crafted. The next best book of the year is another one that I just love so much, and that is Mary by Nat Cassidy. This is another book that truly has made such a deep impact on me. I love this book so much, and it's hard for me to be fully coherent speaking about it because it's another one similar to The Haunting of Hill House where I feel like it just touched me on such like a deep and personal level that it's hard for me to talk about it. Nat Cassidy absolutely blew me away with this book, and I fell head over heels in love with Mary. She is such an inspiration to me. She is a character that is so different and needed in the horror genre. There are some extremely heavy and dark and disturbing themes explored in this book. I feel like this book was just so well done, so well crafted, so beautifully put together. We explore these very dark and violent and disturbing themes, and I feel like they were used in a way in this book to illustrate a point. I just feel like there is such a powerful commentary at the heart of this book. I just love everything about this book. There are funny moments, laugh out loud moments. Mary is such a quirky, interesting, different character, and I'm obsessed. This book is an all-time favorite. I love it. I want to reread this book as soon as possible. The next book to talk about is Bunny by Mona Awad. I loved Bunny so much. I read this book at the very beginning of this year, and it has seriously stuck with me. It has carved a little place in my brain. This book had all my buzzwords in it, okay? It was subversive, it was dreamlike, it was haunting. The writing in Bunny is truly poetic. Mona Awad's writing style is so lush and intriguing. Her descriptions and metaphors are so perfectly articulate and immersive. Bunny is an absolutely wild book, but I truly feel like there is a kind of brilliance in these pages. It's my absolute favorite kind of book that makes you feel like you're existing within a dream. I feel like there is so much to unpack with this book. I love the metaphor aspect within this book of narrative. What this book meant to me was what happens as a writer when your narrative conforms, when you listen or take to heart critiques and let it change the story you want to tell. Bunny to me felt like an ode to writing, and I felt like through the characters, Mona Awad was trying to illustrate taking something you find in the world, the inspiration of the thing, and making that into a story you love, a story you hate, a story you have to kill. The plot she built on that foundation was masterful. The next book that places on my best of 2023 is The September House by Carissa Orlando. This is a very recent read of mine, and man, this is a book that just knocked it out of the park for me. This is another haunted house story. I loved this book so much. I loved the writing. I loved Carissa Orlando's writing in this. I love the way that this author puts a spin on the classic haunted house story, where she totally takes the whole aspect of a haunted house. She almost makes a parody of it. A parody of it that's still a horror novel and still has very scary moments, but is so off the wall and different. And I love when an author can do something different with a very common trope or theme that we've seen explored time and time again, and they find a way to make it their own and make it special and stand out from all the rest. Carissa Orlando definitely did that with The September House. This book to me was the perfect example of an author showing the reader and not telling the reader. This author's writing style was something I really admired, because she was able to start the book off with a certain tone and slowly drop us little hints, little clues, and as the book progresses, you start getting a little bit suspicious of different things, and I just think it was so brilliant the way that this author was able to so subtly build this into the narrative and show the reader instead of just telling us. I absolutely loved the moral at the heart of this book. I feel like this is a book about standing up for yourself, or if you can't stand up for yourself, then finding the strength to stand up for somebody else and finding that breaking point and no longer accepting abuse within your life. It really, again, this is another book that really touched me. It left a lasting impact on me. It was just perfect, honestly. My next best book of the year is Theme Music by T. Marie Vandelli. Once again, this is yet another haunted house story. Haunted houses is one of my very favorite tropes, and I read a lot of them and I tend to love them, and this is another one that I just absolutely loved. This book was pure enjoyment and happiness for me. I loved the use of the unreliable narrator trope in this book. I was completely obsessed with the main character of this story, who from the very beginning, she is displaying these very offhand, subtle red flags, and you're trying to figure out if you can trust this main character, if she's just seeing things, if she's crazy, or if she's somehow involved in what's going on here. We're following our main character who decides to buy her childhood home and move back into the house. The catch is that when she was a baby, her entire family was murdered in this house, and she was the only one who survived. And she wants to move back in to try to figure out what happened all of those years ago. And this book is certainly disturbing. It contains a lot of gore and pretty gross imagery. I was engrossed. This was one of those books where when you're reading it, you are so fully immersed that you forget everything else except what is going on in this book. You forget to check, like, how much longer do I have until the next chapter? You forget to do all those little things that normally you're doing while you're reading, and it takes you out of the story. I was so immersed in this book that I needed to keep reading this like I needed air. And I so rarely feel that immersed and that engaged by a story. One of the most impressive aspects about theme music to me was the way that the author was able to weave so much wit and humor into such a dark story. Going into this book, I did not expect to burst out laughing at so many points. The author seamlessly created levity in what would have otherwise been a very heavy and very dense read. I also really love the very vivid and descriptive writing. For example, there is a scene in this book where the main character is holding a set of crime scene photos that were taken when she was a baby and when her entire family was murdered. And she's holding these pictures in her arms, and she's thinking about how much she does not want to drop these pictures because she doesn't want the other person in the room to see that she has them. And there was a sentence in the text that is a perfect example of this very vivid and descriptive writing that says, "Holding tight to the pictures so they wouldn't slip from my abdomen like entrails." I mean, that is the perfect sentence to illustrate and further the tone of this book. This book had everything for me. It was morbidly comical, spooky, mysterious, and beautifully written. I need more of this. The next best book of the year is Sundial by Catriona Ward. I loved this book so much. I loved this book so much. And it really bums me out that this book is, like, generally disliked by people. I feel like the majority of people don't like this book, and it really bums me out because I feel like there's so much value in this book and so much beautiful writing and atmosphere, and I want more people to read it and love it and enjoy it and get out of it what I did. But at the same time, I know we are all very different readers and we all get something different out of books. So this is one, again, that had a huge impact on me, that really touched me reading it, and it stunned me reading this book. That is how much I loved it. This book is a character study. It is an exploration of nature versus nurture. The characters in this book are completely fascinating, and I was hooked right from the start. There is such thick tension throughout this entire book. I was itching to see how the story would end. This book has my favorite thing in fiction, and that is examining the very complicated relationships that women have with one another. I love books with complicated female relationships between sisters, mothers, daughters. The story is told through several unreliable narrators, and as we parse through the events of the past, the reader gets to decide for themselves whether our identity is determined by our blood or by the environment that we were nurtured within. I love Catriona Ward so much because her writing and prose outshines so many other authors of the genre. Especially in Sundial, she captures the heat and dust of the desert and the emotions of her characters with precision and elegance. I tabbed so many quotes in my copy. I had to restrain myself while reading this because everything that I was reading was standing out to me, and I wanted to highlight, like, the entire book. Honestly, I am enamored with this author and with Sundial primarily. I would, though, go into this book being very mindful of the content warnings because there are trigger warnings in this book for domestic abuse and animal cruelty. But also, I think that there is so much value in the writing and such a lush and complex story of choosing your own fate. This book is amazing. It is powerful, and I think it deserves a lot more hype than it gets. The next best book is Our Hideous Progeny by 𝚲𝚃. In this book, we are actually revisiting Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. We are following Frankenstein's great niece as her and her husband find Victor Frankenstein's notes and use them to attempt to actually create their own creature. I was rooting for these characters so much, and there is such a tense build up towards the climax and finale of this book. I was hooked. I was scared for them. It was like an edge of your seat ride. It left such potent images in my mind that I can so vividly see the ending and climax scene of this book, and it literally makes me emotional when I remember it. It is historical fiction and it is a little bit slower at times. This is one of those books that I really loved and I really connected to because of how much I liked the characters of the book and how much I was rooting for them and wanting them to succeed. It's such an impactful story and definitely one of my favorite reads of the year. The next book is How Can I Help You by Laura Sims. Another book that I absolutely flew through. This book is sharp. This book is punchy. It's bold. It's different. I loved this book so much, especially for being a thriller. For this book to be as sharp and different and bold as it is such a, let me just give a round of applause to Laura Sims because we need more thrillers like this on the market. She was able to write two of the most fascinating and complex characters that I have ever read about. There are quotes in this book that have lived with me since I read it and will probably stick with me for a very long time to come. I have to say, I love how many Shirley Jackson shout-outs there are within this book. She gets quite a few name drops and I was here for it. I love how short and sweet this book is. This author, Laura Sims, she knows how pacing should go. She knows how to write a book with proper pacing and to only tell as much story as the reader needs, So many books. I feel like the authors, they have a really interesting concept and they flop when it comes to execution. They need to edit their books down. They need to get to the point. Laura Sims got to the point. I feel like this book is like a gut punch and it's special. This is a really, really special thriller. So different, so standout, so unhinged. If you like unhinged characters, you absolutely have to read this book. This video is literally probably my favorite video I've ever filmed. I feel so happy. I feel so relaxed talking about these books. This is so fun. This is such a beautiful moment and experience. A culmination of 12 months of reading 200 books, and I get to sit here and talk to you guys about 15 of them that made a deep, lasting impact on me and tell you why. And thank you if you're still watching. Thank you if you made it this far, and thank you for being interested in my favorite books of the year because these books all did something really special for me, and I want you guys to check them out. I want you guys to get out of them what I did. The next best book of the year is Death in Her Hands by 𝚲𝚃. If you are into really, really weird, off-the-wall fiction, this is a must-read for you. It's such an odd narrative. It's so strange, but it was a book that really got me out of a reading slump at the time because it was the first book in several months that really hooked me and fascinated me. This is definitely a character-driven book, and typically I would say I'm not a huge character-driven reader, but this is one of those exceptions to that where the main character is so interesting and complex and different that the fact that nothing really happens the entire book and we are just following the inner stream of consciousness of a very unhinged and complex main character, it didn't matter to me that nothing was going on in this book because I was so engaged by following this character's thoughts. I truly, honestly feel like there is something so special, so almost magical about the way that 𝚘𝙾𝙽𝙃𝙷 wrote this book. I'm not talking about the story, okay? I'm not talking about the plot. I'm talking about the way that she actually wrote this book. There is a rhythm to the writing. There is a pace. There's a punctuation to it that this book reads in such a methodical way that it almost reads like chanting. While I was reading this book, it was like a chanting in my mind. There's like a melody, like a song to the way that this book is written, and I don't know how to explain it other than there is a rhythm and pacing to this writing and prose, and it's so fascinating. I've never read anything else that does quite what this author did in this book. This book keeps you guessing. It keeps you wondering after the last page. After you close the book, you will still be thinking about this story. Nothing happens the entire book, and yet it could not have been more impactful. The next best book of the year is The Writing Retreat by Julia Bartz. You know what's like almost hilarious to me is I have all of these books pulled up on my computer and pulled up on Goodreads, and like the majority of these books have absolutely horrible ratings on Goodreads, like 3 stars or less, which is crazy. And these are my best books of the year. My best books of the year are all of the most lowest rated books on Goodreads. What does that say about me? I don't know. The number one thing that I appreciated about The Writing Retreat was how absolutely refreshing this book was. This book to me was literally a breath of fresh air in the thriller genre. I need more thrillers like this. Thrillers that don't revolve around cheating men, abusive men. Honestly, there's almost no male characters in this book, even to begin with. And I loved it. I loved every single second of it. Give me more female villains, please. I want this book to make an impact on people because I want it to start a trend in the genre where we can get more thrillers like this with this feminine energy and power. It's wild. It's off the wall. The second half of this book especially is so twisty, so gripping. I do think what happens in the second half is completely unrealistic, completely unbelievable, but I'm able to forgive it that because it's so fast-paced, it's so fun. Overall, I loved this book. It was so surprising, so unputdownable. The next best book is The God of Endings by Jacqueline Holland. This book is long, it is chunky, it is hefty, but I think it is worth it. I think it's worth your time. I was utterly captivated reading this book. I could not believe it because, again, this is another one that I would call historical fiction. It's historical fiction, it's character driven, and it's super long and chunky. It has all the things that normally would totally put me off from a book. But I think that's such a testament to how well done this book was that I am not the target audience for this sort of book at all. And it worked for me. It worked for me so much that it's one of my favorite books of 2023. I was captivated by the gorgeous writing and prose. There are such stunning analogies in this book around death, around destruction, life, youth, nature, time, art. This book is told through present and past perspectives as we follow one woman's immortal life and journey. And I really enjoyed following this main character's perspective and seeing her life play out over such a vast amount of time. I equally enjoyed reading both the past perspective, which was so thought-provoking, watching this character and seeing how much devastation that she has to live through. But I really found the present perspective to be especially gripping. Overall, this is a story that will definitely pull me back in the future. It made me appreciate reading longer books and being really immersed in one world and invested in those characters. The next best book of the year is the Bandit Queens by 𝚆𝙃 𝚆𝚃. This book, it's everything I love in fiction. It's surprising, it's radical, it's filled with important commentary on social issues. I am actually so happy because this book was nominated for the 2023 Goodreads Choice Awards for Best Debut Novel. This book definitely deserved to make it into the shortlist of the Women's Prize, and I was so sad when I heard that it did not get shortlisted. So I truly hope that this wins for Best Debut Novel because I think this book is so powerful and impactful, and I want more people to get their hands on it and read it. The next best book of the year is Ghost Eaters by Clay McLeod Chapman. Another book with terrible ratings on Goodreads that I loved. This one was totally unexpected for me. I went into this with no expectation, and it has become a new favorite of the year. I love the nuanced look that this book has on very toxic relationships and how hard it is to let go. This book has themes surrounding drugs and addiction and how hard it is to break addiction. I feel like the last 10% of this book is so unhinged. It's so crazy, but it was so satisfying, and the ending is what solidified this book as a favorite for me. I also love the title of this book and like the double meaning. You have to read it. You have to read this book, but there is a double meaning to this title, and I love that sort of thing. Overall, this was a super enjoyable read with some seriously creepy moments that made me think, it made me laugh, it made me feel. The next best book of the year, I'm so happy to be filming this video right now and that this book is on my list. The next best book of the year is The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. Oh, this was such a good one. I loved this book. I love middle grade fiction. If you guys don't read middle grade fiction, do yourself a favor and start reading middle grade fiction. Middle grade fiction is like a breath of fresh air. It's calming, it's nice, it's relaxing. It's like taking a hot bath after a long, stressful day at work. I feel like this is a book that it's so interesting. It's so interesting to me because Coraline, which is a book also written by Neil Gaiman, is definitely, okay, I have like two all-time favorite films. Coraline is one of them, and Coraline is one of those movies that I can throw on in the background and watch on repeat. Like as soon as the movie ends, I'll hit play and watch it again, and I'll watch the movie for like 8 hours straight as I'm doing stuff around the house. I feel like The Graveyard Book is like the book version of the movie Coraline to me, where I could read this book 100 times more and still not be tired of it, which is so funny because they're both like created by Neil Gaiman's mind. Honestly, I loved The Graveyard Book. It was the exact sort of like cute, spooky mystery that I have just been craving and loving lately. This book totally did it for me, and I will be rereading this book this month, and I am so hyped and excited to dive back into this world. The final best book of the year that I have on my list here, number 15, and by the way, these books were not like ranked, okay? These books were not ranked at all. If you guys are interested in seeing a ranking though, and seeing my number one pick out of these 15, please make sure that you are subscribed to my channel because I will be doing a battle of the best, and I'll have that video out sometime in December. And I do plan on rereading all 15 of these books in December and pitting them against one another. And we will see who comes up on top, who is number one. And I will be doing a ranking of these, but not yet, okay? These are not in an order yet. That aside, the final book, my final favorite book of 2023 is Episode 13 by 𝚆𝙃𝚃𝙃. This was one of the first books I read this year, and it's one that has really stuck with me throughout the course of the year. It's one of those books that actually genuinely scared me. And it's so hard for me to find books that scare me. I don't get scared from books very, very rarely. And I have to say, I think 𝚆𝙃𝚃𝙃 did something really special here, that he was actually able to evoke all the senses enough for me as a reader to get scared and freaked out while reading this book. Like I said, this is one of the first books I read this year, and I remember reading it. I remember the day. I remember being up in my room. It was very early in the morning. So early in the morning where it was still dark outside. I was home alone, and let me tell you, that was a bad idea to put this book on. I spent the rest of the day jumpy. I was looking over my shoulder the whole day because I was so spooked from reading this book. One of my favorite horror tropes is hauntings, anything paranormal. And the end of this book, there is like this terrifying, claustrophobic, infinite labyrinth scene, and I was so into it. This may be listen here. This may be the best. Is it? I need to do a ranking of the best audiobooks I've ever listened to. Ooh, I don't know if I'm gonna say this is the best, because I can think of like 3 others that was also the best, but let me say this is like in my top 5. Okay, this is in my top 5 of the best audiobooks I have ever listened to. This audiobook is totally standout. There's a full cast audio performance for this book that even has sound effects for things and music. And I just felt like I was so immersed in the story. I definitely recommend, if you can get your hands on the audio, do that, because it's truly an experience listening to this book. It will just enhance the story for you. I have been so excited and at the same time so nervous all year long for this video. I wanted to make my list good. I wanted it to be complete. I wanted it to be well-rounded, and I wanted to be like totally sure and confident in all of my picks that I was going to recommend out to you guys, that these truly were my favorite and most best books I read in 2023. And I can tell you guys honestly from the bottom of my heart, these books are standout, amazing, powerful. Every last book that I spoke about on this list, I would recommend to you guys fully, with full confidence. I can't promise you will love it, because like I said, funnily enough, the majority of these books have rock bottom, terrible reviews on Goodreads. So maybe I'm the unpopular opinion on BookTube or something, but these are all books that had a massive impact on me. They're all books that left a lasting impression. They're books that meant something to me, and I strive for and look for what I got out of these 15 books in every single book I pick up. All 200 books that I picked up this year, I wanted what I got out of these 15 books. If you guys have also read any of these, if you've loved any of these, please, please, please let me know in the comments. I would love to gush about them with you guys, especially if you are also in the unpopular opinion with some of these more controversial picks that I know are not favorites for others. I will have coming out very soon my worst books of 2023, and I love to talk about my favorite books. Like, this was such a fulfilling experience sitting down here and filming this video. It felt so good to sit here and talk about the things I love. But you guys, I also love to rant about books. I love to tell you the things I didn't love about books. And I have that video coming up very soon here, so if you are interested in that, I also want to remind you again to subscribe to the channel so you can be here for when that video goes out. Other than that, thank you guys so much for listening to me in this video and sticking around while I go over my very extensive list of books here. This video was so so fun and fulfilling to film, seriously. So thank you so much for listening to me. I hope you guys all have an amazing day. I hope you're having a fantastic December. But other than that, I will see you guys in my next video.